That summer that I was 10. Can it be that there was only one summer that I was 10? It must have been a long one then. Each day I'd go out to choose a fresh horse for my stable, which was a willow grove down by the old canal. I'd go on my 2 bare feet. But when with my brother's jackknife, I'd cut me a long, limber horse with a good thick head for a knob and peeled him back, slick and clean, except for a few leaves for the tail. And cinched my brother's belt around his head for a rein, I'd straddle and canter him fast up the grass bank to the path, trot along in the lovely dust that talcumed over his hooves, hiding my toes and turning. His feet 2 swift half moons, the willow knob with the strap jouncing between my thighs was the pommel and yet the pole of my knicker and pony's head. My head and my neck were mine, yet they were shaped like a horse. My hair flopped to the side like the mane of a horse in the wind. My forelock swung in my eyes, my neck arched, and I snorted. I sheed and skittered and reared, stopped and raised my knees, pawed at the ground and quivered. My teeth bared as we wheeled and swished through the dust again. I was the horse and the rider. In the leather I slapped to his rump, spanked my own behind, doubled my 2 hoofs beat, and galloped along the bank. The wind twanged in my mane, my mouth squeered to the bit, and yet I sat on my steed, quiet, negligent riding, my toes standing in the stirrups, my thighs hugging his ribs. At a walk we drew up to the porch. I tethered him to a paling. Dismounting, I smoothed my skirt and entered the dusky hall. My feet on the clean linoleum left ghostly toes in the hall.
"Where have you been?"
said my mother. "Been riding," I said from the sing, and filled me a glass of water.
"What's that in your pocket?"
she said. "Just my knife." It weighed my pocket and stretched my dress awry.
"Go tie back your hair,"
said my mother.
"Why is your mouth all green?"
"Rob Roy, he pulled some clover as we crossed the field," I told her.
This is The Centaur by Mae Swenson, and I will be analyzing it using soapstone. So, when you just simply look at the title of this poem, it's called The Centaur. And a centaur is a half human, half horse. Very strong. Usually the typical image that comes to mind when think of a centaur as like a really strong, muscular, like Greek man who's half man, half horse. So that kind of gives an idea of what the poem could be about or based on. So when you start reading the poem, you can tell that the author is reflecting back, and she is reflecting back on her youth. The summer that I was 10. Could it only be one? Time is flowing by. So kind of starts off with a reflective tone here, where the occasion is the author thinking about the past. So this poem is composed of 3-line stanzas. And it kind of tells a story. Each stanza is kind of connected, and we see the first connection here, around right here, where the author said she goes out and chooses a fresh horse from her stable. And you're like, okay, she's going to pick a horse. But when you follow back here to the next stanza, it says which was a willow grove. So it's not a real horse. But you have to kind of read them all together and go back to the other stanza and keep it flowing and realize that, oh, it's not a real horse. So a lot of what's happening in this poem is kind of putting together the opposing aspects of imagination and reality. So we kind of want to keep that in mind when we're reading this, because already from knowing that she calls a tree branch her horse, there's a lot of imagination already starting here. So, also the author kind of leads the reader on by kind of just explaining her ride on this horse that's actually a tree branch. And you kind of read, and you're not really getting to anything that's really big. She's just using a lot of imagery, such as, really all of it is imagery. She describes her ride, and there's a lot of kind of movement too, like a good thick knob for her head, and like spanked my own behind, and I slapped to his bum. So a lot of action verbs. And she explains her ride, like my head, my hair flops side to side like the mane of a horse in the wind. So the speaker is comparing herself to a horse. Here is some more imagery. My forelegs swung in my eyes, my neck ached and I snorted. And here's some more, like you can even hear the ride. I sheed and I skittered and reared. So this is all very important. Going back to the two opposing forces of imagery and reality. Imagination and reality. Because a lot of this imagination comes from the imagery. And here's a really important kind of section that kind of really goes to the whole purpose of this poem. As she's explaining her ride, she said, I was the horse and the rider. So that's a very powerful statement. And she's saying that she is the horse. And what we know about horses, they're very strong, powerful animals. So she's saying that she's strong and she's powerful. So now as the reader comes, or the speaker comes back from her ride, she is back at reality. She steps up to her porch, and she's describing that she's dirty from the ride and she's messy, which is not really something that a lot of young girls get involved in. That's not really what society has pictured for them. So here this is a really big snap into reality. Where have you been? Said my mother. That sounds kind of like a concerned statement. What's that in your pocket? Like really asking questions that are really inquisitive and kind of almost judgmental. But the girl is pretty casual about her answer. It's just my life. And here is a really important statement where the mother asks her to go tie back your hair. Now this is really big with the subject, purpose, and even the tone, as the girl snapbacks to reality of her mother's expectation versus who she actually is. So we're on this high here with the ride, and it's exciting and it's powerful, but here is back to reality where the mother wants her to be a normal girl and go tie her hair back and clean up. So that's really big to the purpose of this poem, which is kind of empowerment and how imagination is powerful, and women, can be tomboyish. So when we do Soapstone after reading this poem, we know that the speaker is a young girl. It's actually probably someone older, but she's reflecting back to when she was 10. So she's a young girl, and she's kind of a tomboy, as we kind of know from really this section. The occasion is the summer of the girl's youth, where she's riding a horse that's actually a tree branch, and thinking about the past. The audience is just the reader. It's not really, from what we know or can prove, it's not really directed at someone. And then the purpose is to show the power of youth and freedom of youth, and how it is pure, how pure you are when you're young and you don't think about what society's norms are. and also I think to empower women, since this girl's so casual about who she is, and she doesn't really think that it's weird that she's riding a horse and getting messy and dirty. The subject is women empowerment and purity of youth, which we can see from here, and how exciting her whole youth experience is. And then the tone is, it starts off pretty liberating and free in her ride, and she's, powerful and excited, and she is the horse. And then it comes back to reality in a realistic tone. And overall, really, this is a reflective tone that she's talking about childhood. So that is The Centaur by May Swenson.